There's a hearing that's going on. There's one in Colorado and there's one in Minnesota, and that's one I want to get caught up on because, you know what, our friend has been all over that. His name is Bill Werner. He's our correspondent, Minnesota News Network. Bill, welcome back, man. You've been busy, my friend.
This is a big day. I mean, we get national stories around in Minnesota occasionally, but this is really a big one, in terms of that it plays right into the 2024 election. I mean, the question being that there's a group that is petitioning the Minnesota Supreme Court, asking them to keep Donald Trump's name off the ballot in 2024. And it all is, it's a constitutional question, at least the heart of the whole argument is, Tyler.
Mm-hmm.
And if folks don't mind, without getting into the weeds too far, I want to read from the actual section of the United States Constitution, just a little piece of it here,
sure.
About what the case is hanging on. It's the 14th Amendment. It's Section 3, in case anybody wants to look it up. It was passed in 1866, so right after the Civil War, and that's kind of what prompted it. And I'll just read just a couple quick excerpts out of it that are kind of the heart of this case. It says, no person shall be a senator or a representative in Congress or an elector of president and vice president or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or under any state, who having previously taken an oath to support the Constitution of the United States shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. So the petitioners are saying insurrection. They are alleging that's what Donald Trump did on January 6th. Right, and that's the heart of the case in terms of constitutional. Now, there's a lot of other questions too that are being brought up, but that's the heart of it.
Bill, that term's been thrown around a lot since that day, and I mean it still is pretty fresh because I remember sitting in this very studio, giving those live updates, wondering and getting our our congressmen and senators on to make sure they were safe, along with their staff, and since then. Right. There's been, insurrection. Others saying, Tyler, it never was dubbed an insurrection. So do you know, Bill, in this court case, who, if anybody, would have to determine, yes, in fact, it was an insurrection, or no, it was just a riot that got out of control?
You're asking the key question, okay? And there was debate in the oral arguments, or discussion, I should say, in the oral arguments today before the Minnesota Supreme Court about, in fact, who should do that. Does the determination in terms of the impeachment proceedings against Donald Trump, does that determine it? The fact that he was not convicted, right, of those accusations, does that determine it? Do the courts determine it? And the indications that we're getting, and it's shaky to try to predict what the Supreme Court justices might rule. Okay, but a lot of analysts that I talked to on this, including our veteran analyst, Hamline University, Professor David Schultz, he's a legal and a political expert. What he's saying, and what seems to be the indication, is that these justices are wondering whether they should wade into this. And I'll play a key clip, just about a 30-second clip here from the Chief Justice of the Minnesota Supreme Court, Natalie Hudson, and what she said in court just earlier today.
Let's say we agree with you that we do have the authority to keep Mr. Trump's name off the ballot. Should we, is the question that concerns me the most. You run square into the problem where you have the potentiality of 50 different states deciding this question differently, whether states have the right to determine who's eligible for a national office. And that concerns me, that you have this possibility for just chaos.
Now, the response from the petitioner's attorney, these are the folks who want Trump's name off the ballot. Ronald Fine is their attorney, and he says Minnesota law
says shall, not may, and had the legislature intended to provide discretionary jurisdiction, the legislature certainly could have.
But former President Trump's attorney, Nicholas Nelson, told the court it is not for the courts to decide whether the former president is on the ballot.
When parties ask the courts to decide who can or can't be president, the courts overwhelmingly say that's not a decision that should be made in the judiciary. That's a decision that should be made elsewhere.
So you're going to get an idea there, Tyler, of how the arguments are lining up. Now, there's another issue as well. Folks may have noted that in the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, it talks about that no person may hold any office, and it also came up in the oral arguments what that really means. As an example, the kind of one of the pointed question from Associate Justice Ann McCaig.
Is there a difference between holding office and putting his name on the ballot? And does that impact, or should it impact, our analysis here?
Well, Attorney Ronald Fine, again, the petitioner's attorney, the folks who want Trump off the ballot, responded, the U.S. Constitution prohibits holding office, but Minnesota state law says
you can't run for an office, you can't appear on a ballot for which you are ineligible.
But Trump attorney Nicholas Nelson is arguing the former president is not ineligible under the U.S. Constitution because of what happened on January 6th.
Was crimes, some of them serious, was violence, some of it serious, but that it did not reach the scale or scope of what would be regarded as an insurrection.
So you can see, Tyler, it comes right back to the question that you asked, right, about is it in fact an insurrection? Where is that decision? Where should that decision rest? Should it be with the courts, or should it be with the Congress, or should it be with the people of the United States of America, the people of Minnesota, and by extension, the people who are voting in the rest of the states?
That's clear as mud, my friend. What I see just observing here, because that, like I say, that term insurrection has been thrown around. I think some can argue appropriately in one case versus another, and I'll give you an example here. I know that the current president, Joe Biden, was at a farm in Minnesota yesterday, and there was there's protests. There was demonstrations based on the administrative approach towards Gaza, Israel, Palestine, Hamas, and that also happened inside the United States Capitol just, I think, last week. And they are wanting to, some people that don't want to deem what happened on January 6th as an insurrection, they're trying to label those protests as insurrection. So, Bill, my point is everything's now being called an insurrection, in my opinion, to try to make this even less clear of an argument for a case like what's going on in the Supreme Court in your state.
And the argument, of course, of former President Trump's attorneys is that this is a lot different than the Civil War, and I don't think there's any dispute that the Civil War and the aftermath of that prompted the 14th Amendment, Section 3 of the United States Constitution. But Trump's attorneys are arguing, hey, this is nothing like, we didn't go anywhere near as far down the path as what happened in the Civil War, and the petitioners, attorneys, people who want Trump's name off the ballot, say, well, he goaded these people, incited them, said you've got to fight like hell was the word, right?
Right.
And sent them off to the Capitol, and they almost prevented the Congress from doing what it was legally supposed to do, which is to certify the results of a presidential election. But the takeaway from today's hearing, I think, Tyler, really is that the justices, I think, are, and again, I don't want to presume to be in their minds, okay? We can only kind of read from kind of the indications they're giving in oral arguments by the questions that they're asking and what analysts are saying, yes, that these questions indicate certain things, is that they're very circumspect to wade into this. And it's a question of, in fact, the timing of it. Might they say, no, the Constitution says hold office. It doesn't say whether you can have them on the ballot or not. So that decision is premature. Okay, in other words, the case isn't ripe in legal terminology. Okay, legal parlance.
Go ahead.
So go ahead.
No, well, I hate this term because it's used for everything, but maybe we're living in those type of times that it's an unprecedented case where what you're saying, but the line of questioning from the justices is really trying to figure out a separation of, the federal, state, people.
Correct.
It's for political science. For political scientists, fascinating. But I think there are some people that they want to have this, and I guess I can't speak for the Free Speech for People group, which I'll ask you about in a minute here. They want a definitive answer like last year, and now they're getting their day in court, literally. This isn't something that's just going to be, okay, yep, oh, here it is. You can just tell already from this the oral arguments bill that they're really trying, as you're painting the picture for us, try to figure out exactly what role who plays, and that is not going to be just a quick overnight solution.
That's correct. And some of the analysts, David Schultz from Hamlin, notably among them, is saying that the proper role is to let this be decided by the people of the United States of America. And he points back to the Bush v. Gore case, right, where there was a Supreme Court ruling in there, and there are many who pointed the finger at the Supreme Court for saying they decided that election. So what do? Do you say, no, we're not going to, as a court, does the court say, no, we're not going to make a decision now to keep him off the ballot. We're going to let the electoral process play out, let the people go to the voting booths if Trump is on the ballot, and if he wins, then we have the issue of, does the Constitution allow him to hold office, right? Then, of course, you have a situation where you might have a ruling from a state Supreme Court in one state that's different from another, and where do we go from there? Ultimately, this case, I think even this case of whether he's on or off the ballot likely ends up at the United States Supreme Court, right? Because you've got Colorado cases and you've got cases in, half a dozen, I guess, or more of other states that are pending. But Colorado was first out of the gate, and Minnesota close behind on this one.
Bill, I just have a quick question here. You're right. I think this does get appealed, no matter what that decision.
Yeah, I think so.
It ends up in the Supreme Court of the United States here, but
maybe not from Minnesota, but from some other. We don't know Minnesota yet. Possibly from Minnesota, but certainly I would think with all the other states that are in play. Yeah.
Final question that's not really related, but I did bring it up just a little bit ago. The demonstrations, the protests, about Joe Biden coming. The take from. Right. I mean, is that a groundswell? Is it a large, hey, we're not happy, they're going to rally? Because I think about, there's one side of the equation we just talked about with Donald Trump. The other side is likely going to be Joe Biden. Yeah. And there's a voting bloc there that is being threatened, saying, no, we're done with him. Is there a lot of legs to this protest out there?
Yeah, well, and the protests, are, of course, what's happening in the Middle East, right, with Israel and Gaza. Okay, they're centering around that. The broader question is, does concern or doubt, or however you want to term it, on the part of some Democrats about the president's age, let's be frank, okay, and watching that closely, his performance in various public venues, including yesterday in Minnesota, right, okay, does that have enough traction to give folks like Dean Phillips momentum, or somebody else, as an example? Or are people going to say, well, we've got a known quantity with Joe Biden, and we know I'm talking about Democrats now, okay, and we know what the opposition, who the opposition probably will be, right? Probably Donald Trump. So what do we do in this case? And some polls are suggesting that people want to take more that approach about, hey, we have a known quantity here, even though there may be a question about his age, right? But again, that's one poll, and other polls have shown other things.
Yeah. Bill, I'm out of time, man. I'll be following along. The next time these guys and gals get together, I expect you to come on and give us the latest, all right?
Absolutely. Yeah, a lot going on. We'll talk to you then.
All right, you take care until next time, all right?
All right, you too, huh?
All right. That's Bill Werner, Minnesota News Capital Correspondent. Your thoughts, 35270. I got to get a weather update. Way behind my time for Too Tall Tom Schmansky.